Redfin just released new data on the US housing market that's showing some very concerning trends as we enter the latter part of 2024. Namely, the home buyer demand continues to go down, with the level of price cuts now rising to the highest level in nearly a decade. With Redfin's recent housing market analysis showing that pending home sales are down 7.8% annually, the biggest decline in nearly a year. You can see that this pending sales index is now down so low that it's about 40% less than the peak of buyer demand in 2021. And the more that home buyer demand declines, the more likely it is that prices are going to drop, because more sellers on the US housing market are now waking up and realizing that lower interest rates and mortgage rates isn't bringing the buyers back in, so the only way to get any traction on your listing is to price it appropriately. With the same data from Redfin showing that 6.6% of listings had a price drop through the first week of September, this annualizes to over 25% of listings in a month, with the price drops on some listings now getting so severe that the values are falling back to their mid-2021 levels. But it's not all good news for you guys as home buyers out there, because even though the prices are starting to go down in many cities and states across America, they are still way higher than their long-term norms, and they still feel very expensive for most home buyers, because what happened during the pandemic is that the prices went up at a much faster rate than the income levels and the rent levels, which has caused a tremendous disconnect in valuations that's leaving many regular home buyers and investors to continue to wait on the sidelines. Now, according to Redfin and some of their real estate agents, they're saying that buyers are holding off on closing until the end of the month in hopes that rates will come down by more. They're also seeing people postponing until after the presidential election. Buyers tend to be more careful about major financial decisions around a consequential election. And I think it's really interesting when I talk to a lot of realtors out there, I hear a lot of people talking about the election as a reason that buyers aren't coming back and that demand is still down. And the idea behind this is that somehow home buyers who've been thirsty to buy a house for the last 3 or 4 years and are desperate to buy are simply not buying due to the election, whether it's Kamala Harris or Donald Trump who becomes president. And I find this argument very amusing, because I don't buy it. I don't think a home buyer who's been desperate to buy is going to put off buying if they find the right house at the right price point because of an election. I think rather this is a narrative and a talking point in the real estate industry that people are using to try to justify why the buyer demand is still so low. And I think the longer that this goes on for, with really low buyer demand and no bounce back, the more people will wake up to the reality that it's the prices that are too high. It's sky high prices that are keeping buyers on the sidelines. It's not mortgage rates. It's not the election. It's not the NAR settlement agreement. It's the fact that no one wants to pay $600,000 for a house that was worth $300,000 4 years ago. People don't want to do it, and they actually just don't have the money to do it. I'm going to show you two graphs here, everyone, that are very important for you to understand. The first graph is the personal savings rate. You might have heard me refer to this data point several times in the last month or two, and the big problem right now in the economy is that the personal savings rate in America is down to 2.9%, meaning that the average American only saves 2.9% of their income. Now, that's the second lowest personal savings rate on record. The only other time Americans were saving so little money due to the cost of things being higher than the incomes was the mid-2000s, at the peak of that last housing bubble. You can see in the mid-2000s the savings rate dropped to around 2.4%, 2%. And was around the same level in late 2007 that it is today, before we had the big crash. And then the savings obviously went up during the crash because people significantly cut back their spending. And so this is the first thing to understand. Americans don't have excess money. There's no discretionary income available to buy houses at crazy high prices. That's what the record low savings rates are telling you, and it's kind of confirming that we're in a bubble, right? It's confirming that the housing market's in a bubble, that the economy and consumer spending is running on fumes, because there's just nothing left over for Americans to put in their bank account and, afford a down payment, for instance. Now, the other issue is that the payments are also way too high relative to people's incomes. The typical mortgage payment as a percentage of Americans' income over the last 40 years back to 1984. And what you can see in today's market is that the typical homebuyer needs to spend 40.5% of their gross income on their mortgage payment. Typical mortgage payment of $2,700 a month, which annualizes to around $32,000 a year on median income of $80,000. And so this is an even higher payment ratio than we saw in '06 at the peak of the last bubble and the early 1980s when mortgage rates were like 15%. So we've really never before seen this lack of affordability on mortgage payments. And really what I think is going to need to happen, we're going to need to get to this dotted line, which is 30% mortgage payment to income ratio. I think if we get to the 30% mortgage payment to income ratio, which is the long-term median, we'll see buyer demand return. However, you could see we're a long way from that occurring. And I've been talking to actually a lot of mortgage brokers down here in Florida, and a lot of them are saying that the mortgage applications that they are seeing are at crazy high debt to income levels. They're saying they're seeing people apply for FHA mortgages at debt to incomes of almost 50%. Because the FHA program actually allows buyers to apply for mortgages, I think, up to a 57% DTI, which is absolutely crazy. So, we have really low savings. People can't afford to buy an expensive house, mixed with people don't have enough income to afford the mortgage payments, which is why the demand is so low and why prices need to go down to bring that demand back into the market. Now, encouragingly, Zillow just released their August 2024 home value estimates, and we are now seeing prices go down in a lot of different parts of America according to these Zillow home value estimates. Let's take a look at this and see how your city is doing. Zillow just released this data today, and we're currently loading it into Reventure app. It should be available on Reventure app in the next day or two, this August 2024 home value data. But what I want you to pay attention to is, first thing, Zillow said nationally there was 0.07% monthly home value growth in August. So basically prices were flat nationally, but there was big differences on markets. We could see here New York and LA actually had positive home price growth 0.5% on the month, which is pretty good, New York and LA. In addition, Chicago had positive home price growth. However, Dallas had negative, Houston had negative, Phoenix had negative, San Francisco had negative, Tampa, Florida had negative, and you actually see a lot of markets here have a negative sign in front of them. So a lot of markets are, officially in home value declines according to the Zillow Home Value Index. You can see Austin is still going down 0.4% on the month. You can see we're starting to register negatives in Nashville, which is something I've been predicting for a while. Jacksonville was in the negatives. Memphis was in the negatives. We had a pretty big decline in New Orleans, and then the biggest declines are occurring in Cape Coral, Florida, and Northport, Sarasota, Florida. And the way Zillow's Home Value Index works is that it's a seasonally adjusted figure that attempts to smooth out some of the volatility in the market. So often Zillow's Home Value Index lags a little bit, its seasonally adjusted home value index, some of the changes you're seeing on the ground. And the reason Zillow does that is because it doesn't want to report figures that are going crazy and up and down every month. However, I think we're going to continue to see declines in the Zillow Home Value Index, especially in Florida. Because when I go on the ground in Florida, I'm just seeing lots of listings with huge price reduction, a lot bigger than 1% or 0.5%. I showed you guys this listing earlier. It's a 2-bed, 2-bath in Bradenton, $480,000. Now you could see that it was originally listed at $630 in March 2023. So it was listed a year and a half ago, and it took them a year and a half to cut it down to 480 grand. And you could see here that really we're making some huge progress now in cutting the price. The current Zillow value estimate for this property is now back to where it was between May and June 2021. So that's pretty big, everyone. Lowest value in 3.5 years. Here's another listing, everyone. This is in Seminole, Florida, which is on the west side of St. Petersburg. We're down to $399 on this 3-bed, 2-bath. Actually, this looks like a recent flip now that I'm looking at it. It looks like it was recently renovated. Maybe it was a 6 or 7 out of 10 renovation. The seller on this house originally priced it at $499 in May, and they've since cut it to $399. So that's a $100,000 price cut. And actually, really interestingly, just down the street, everyone, there was a foreclosure. There's a foreclosure where the house sold at auction for a huge reduction from what it was listed for. It was listed at $675 originally late 2023, ended up selling for $480,000. You can see here that's minus almost 30%. And so we are really starting to see in Florida some big declines in values on certain listings. I've been showing you them on this channel over the last 1 to 2 months because I think it's so important for you guys to see what's going on the ground. That there are houses and neighborhoods where values are really starting to drop, and we're starting to see that now show up in some of the aggregate data reported by companies like Zillow and Redfin. And if I had to guess, everyone, I'm going to give you some projections now for where I think values are going to drop the most over the next year here on ReVenture App. We're going to look at states here. We're going to look at the 48 continental US states, and we'll actually talk a little bit about Hawaii out here as well. I know I got some people in Hawaii. Don't worry, I'm going to talk about Hawaii in a second. And let's look at the ReVenture home price forecast score for these different states. And this price forecast might change in the next couple of days when we update the data. But for now, we're showing price is still projected to go up in the Northeast and Midwest. Scores above a 50. We got the red here indicating upward price pressure. But really, we're starting to spread now on the areas where prices are projected to go down over the next year. Texas and Florida have the lowest scores of any state in America. Prices in these states are going to keep dropping. Tennessee is a state all of a sudden now, which is starting to turn into a pretty big buyer's market. It might not totally feel that way yet in Tennessee, but it's trending in that direction based on the inventory. Colorado is another market. We're starting to see the prices already start to drop, and I think will continue to drop into the future, as well as in the Pacific Northwest. And oh yeah, Hawaii has a ReVenture App price forecast score of 45 out of 100, which is an improvement over the last couple of years, indicating more of a buyer's market. Now, in terms of the cities with the lowest home price forecast score, we're seeing a lot of areas in Texas, a lot of Texas with really low scores indicating declining prices. We're seeing some Tennessee, we're seeing Florida. There's Austin, Texas, Panama City, Florida, San Antonio, Texas, Denver, Colorado, Cape Coral, Florida. So I would encourage you guys to head on ReVenture App and understand what the price forecasts are for your area. Are prices forecast to go down, or are they forecast to go up, like in some of these metros with scores well above a 50? It's so important to understand what the data is saying about your housing market right now in these volatile times, because this market will continue to shift over the next 3 or 4 months, and you're going to want insight into the future direction of prices based on the current data and fundamentals. So head to www.reventure.app and sign up for a premium plan to access that home price forecast score. You can see it here under ReVenture scores. The cost of a premium plan is only $39 a month, very affordable compared to the cost of buying a house and having peace of mind about your investment. Go there right now, www.reventure.app. Look at that home price forecast score, ranks 0 to 100, down to your zip code as well, so you can understand in your neighborhood where prices are likely heading into the future.